Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenkyu, and today is episode number 22, Navigating the Underworld in Real Time. Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. We are going to be talking about the underworld as it presents itself in real time in 3D. So, in shamanic practice, the underworld is a place that we navigate to on purpose when we need to do certain things in the spirit realm. And those things are typically revolving around shadow work, working with ancestors or spirit guides, or doing some of the deeper healing work in ourselves. This realm is also very much connected to shadow work, um, all types of trauma healing, inner child work. This is kind of a big topic, and the context in which I'm going to speak about it today is through my personal experiences visiting the underworld in real time as I walk through life right now. Now, an important thing I want to add on the front end of this podcast is that we are living in a shamanic dream all the time when we are living from a place of intention and like a awakened space. We're always in ceremony, we're always in altered state, we're always navigating upper world, lower worlds. And in this case, I'm going to be talking about the underworld, which is also known as the lower world. So you can call it whatever you'd like, it's the same thing. Um, I'm personally in a very deep place of underworld journey in my life right now. And I want to explain what this looks like, what this feels like, what happens in this space, what it means, because I'm sure that a lot of other people go through this process and don't really understand that that's what's happening, or maybe they don't have words for their experience. And I hope to reflect that for people in need. So, right now, I am in the underworld. I'm doing underworld healing. This means that I am healing some deep core woundings in myself. Um, what this feels like is a lot of heaviness. It feels like I am swimming in a pool of mud and I'm having trouble kind of climbing out of it sometimes. It's very heavy, it's very dense. There's often a lot of like really heavy emotions. So, sadness, grief, despair, fear, um, anxiety, paranoia, and many different flavors of these emotions as well. So, it generally feels very heavy. It can also feel like you're in integration. So when you're in a space of integration, your head feels kind of cotton like you're neither here nor there. Something is integrating, so nothing is clear. Things are very muddled. That goes hand in hand with the density that I'm speaking about. One of the signature markers for being in an underworld space for me is that I lose my direct connect to spirit. So my messages aren't as clear. My sight isn't as clear. I don't really feel like I know why I'm here and what I'm doing. I get put into a temporary amnesia state. And the amnesia state is something that we encounter a lot as humans. But in this case specifically, like I was guided to relocate to Florida. I'm staying with my parents temporarily. And now that I'm here, things are so heavy that I forgot what I'm doing here. I forgot that I was called here. And I have to constantly remind myself, like, hey, there's a bigger picture. Hey, your intuition brought you here. And I have to remind myself multiple times per day. And that's what it feels like when you're doing deep underworld work. It's like you forget the bigger picture, the higher level view, because you're in the muck of it. You're clearing out like some old stuff, some deep stuff, and you cannot do that while simultaneously being in the higher vibration. And I think a lot of people they don't understand that that's a part of deeper spiritual work, of like more grounded spiritual work, of actual change and growth is that we have to go to these deep dark places to do our shadow work, to do our childhood trauma healing and that sort of thing. So as I'm in this space, I don't have a direct connection to spirit. And so I'll, in lieu of having like direct conversation, I'll be pulling tarot cards. I'll be pulling oracle cards. I'll do some automatic writing. I'll have to do some like more extensive walking or stretching and yoga just to open up that channel a little bit to remind me like, hey, you're okay. Hey, this is why we came here. Like, eyes on the prize, Nadia. Feel the feelings, let it be challenging, and don't forget the big picture. So, what does it mean to be in the underworld? This means that we are doing deep healing in the psyche. So, in my case, it's all about my childhood, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This is the first time that I've circled back to my parents, to my home in almost 20 years. And it's all about inner child healing. It's all about understanding where my origin story began as a human and like how I was impacted by my parents. And so this is like pretty deep stuff. It's pretty foundational, pretty core. And it's not even necessarily like big childhood stuff. It's more, I have these belief systems, I have these things that I did to adapt to my environment. I took on these things that weren't mine. It's huge foundation rebuilding happening right now. So, I'm going to teach you a little bit about how this process is looking for me and the history of it and the direction that it's going through like sharing my personal experience and storytelling. Vulnerability is a big part of my work, and I think that in the shamanic world, we learn best through hearing firsthand experience, through having our own experience. There is no like course that I can teach you about the underworld that will help you as much as witnessing me go through it or going through it yourself and being able to properly identify it. This is shamanism, this is teaching. So it does force me to be a bit more vulnerable and open than I think a lot of practitioners are comfortable with, but this is how we learn. So, through hearing these stories, you can understand more complex and multidimensional concepts that are often just too abstract to grasp. Like I said, you can't you can't take a course in Underworld and like understand it. You have to understand it on such a deeper level in order to really get it. So, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my childhood and what I'm going through in this process right now that I've kind of set out how it feels when you're in this space. So when I was a kid, there was a lot of control and a lot of structure, and it caused me to rebel real hard. As soon as I turned 18, it was like, get me out of here at all costs. I didn't make great decisions before I turned 18, but when I turned 18, it was like, there are no rules. Um, Out and about all the time, the drugs, the alcohol, the sex. And it really sent me down a path of karmic return. And what I mean by that is, I was not ready to face myself. I was not ready to face a lot of truths about my family at that time. And so I made decisions based on fear, based on running. And that path ultimately got me back to where I am today, 20 years later. It was a karmic path. So now that I've been through what I've been through in my life, I'm able to come back and really look at myself and look at where I came from. And I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply about some of that in a minute. So, in my childhood, there was just a lot of restriction, a lot of rules. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things before I turned 18, like even going to a drive in movie with my friends. And I struggled really hard with mental illness. And it's hard, it's challenging to know like what caused what and if it's even that linear. But I didn't have like a particularly good adolescence because of the mental illness and then all the restriction in the home environment. So when I turned 18, it was like chaos. Like, get me out of here. I'm going to take whatever anchor I can take to pull me out. And my avenue was men. So I didn't know this at the time, but when I was younger, just felt like I could attract a man who would get me out of the house that I was in. That led to me getting pregnant very young, making some very bad decisions. That marriage was not okay. He was not an okay person. Ended up having to like take back rights. And then after that marriage ended, went back into the same cycle of if I could just find a man, if I could just find a husband, I could just find a father. and then made that decision again in my second marriage. So there was definitely a trajectory there. And went through this whole piece of chasing after somebody who couldn't love me for me, but it was just enough to have him there that I felt safe. Like, okay, I won't be alone, at least. He doesn't have to really like me. He doesn't have to really love me. He doesn't have to be spectacular as a person, but I won't be alone. And I know he's going to take care of me because obligations and duties. Um, and so the last 13 years has really been about excavating the wounds that caused me to make those decisions, that caused me to go down that path. And now, my divorce completed last year, and this is the full circle moment. So here I am coming back to it's not even my childhood home. My parents relocated to Florida last year, but coming back to live with my parents and then finally getting to be an adult human with a well developed ego and the ability to see what this environment actually is and how it actually impacts me. It's been a completely mind blowing experience. Now, I think it's interesting because a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends, they talk about how they don't like going to see their parents. They could never see themselves like getting close to them again. They just kind of want to move out and move along. And I get that. I actually didn't feel compelled to come move here until maybe 2 months ago. And it was actually a really clear message from spirit that was like, yeah, you need to go live with your parents. Um, so I understand the resistance or the lack of desire there. And I hope that in sharing this story, it kind of sheds light on the importance of circling back around to get that perspective that I'm sharing with you today. So at this point, I've been at my parents' house for a week, and was not prepared for the environment that I walked into. As I mentioned, there was a lot of restriction and rules and structure in my childhood. And at this point in their life, their environment is the opposite. So there is music playing all the time. There's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of smoking, there's no schedule, there's constantly eating out, down to like there is no rhyme or reason in the dishwasher. I don't know if any of you grew up in that household where like the dishes had to be put away just so. That is the kind of household that I grew up in. So to even see the dishwasher be complete chaos is kind of blowing my mind. There's constantly someone singing or humming in the house, and it's just 24/7 chaos and 24/7 noise. And it's really taken me by surprise. Now, the interesting thing is that looking back on myself, I can see that I was not developed enough in who I was to stand tall in an environment like this. My dad has addiction issues and a number of other issues, and so he was not super present for me physically or emotionally. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the fathers and the men in our life reflect back who we are. They help us develop our ego. And so I didn't really have a strong sense of self when I was a kid, which means I could not be in this environment and survive. I had a lot of like night terror-esque type stuff where I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel really bad and ruminate. I couldn't sleep in my room. I had to sleep on the couch. Like I just felt bad all the time. I went down the mental illness path and treatment and all that. But as I come back here as an adult, I'm noticing the same thing, that I'm waking up in the middle of the night and feeling really bad. And as I sit with this and let it unfold, I can see that it's actually not mine, that it is the environment around me, which was largely in the shadow when I was a kid, and now it's out in the open. It's me kind of like seeing it, witnessing it, holding it, and taking it on as my own when I absolutely don't have to, when it's absolutely not mine. So being here is giving me the opportunity to reassert myself, to reassert who I am, to stand in my own power, to identify my needs, my wants, my desires, and to claim them and to go after them and allow this chaos, this hurricane to just exist around me. And if you are in that kind of environment, it either takes you down with it or it teaches you how to be stronger. And I feel like coming back as an adult, I'm getting this opportunity to make a different decision. So when I was in this environment as a kid, option one is to have it strengthen you. I couldn't do that because my ego was not well developed. I didn't have what I needed to be that person. The second option is to let it take you down too, which would be the path of insanity, which is definitely an energy in my family. There's a lot of insanity energy, so it's like a chaos but doesn't make sense, and that would have been the path of like severe mental illness. And I took the third door, which was get the fuck out. So now that I'm back here, I get to reassert myself. I get to make a different choice, and that's to be stronger and more firm in who I am. And it's honestly such a gift. So it's forcing me into this space where I have to try extra hard to have a routine because they have none. I have to try extra hard to do good things for my body because they're not doing good things for their body. And it would be really easy to slide down that hole with them. Like, great, everybody started drinking at noon today. That's cool. You know what? I'm going to choose not to do that, even though I love alcohol and it's an easy distraction for me. Um, it's almost like the universe is asking me to reassert, like make a different choice. The other thing that's been super interesting is seeing how much of my life I have taken on that's not mine. And, I do a lot of personal work. I do a lot of therapy and coaching and shamanic work. And this is something that has always kind of eluded me. I'll ask the question like, is this mine? So many people tell you to do that. Ask if it's yours. Yeah, I've never come across anything that was like, nope, it's not mine, where it wasn't really obvious. Sometimes I come across like weird collective stuff that I'm holding on to, like beliefs that are related to religion. But all the normal stuff always felt like mine, until I got here. And I noticed that there are a lot of things that my parents do that I'm like, oh, damn, you do that. And I do that. Did I start doing that when I was a kid because I just like assumed that that was mine? Because, kids, we absorb. They're little empaths and they absorb everything and they take everything on as their own. And so I'm seeing like the cynical viewpoint around life, the OCD and cleaning anxiety, judgment about how people look in the most covert ways. I don't do this about other people anymore, but I definitely do it about myself. And seeing it like said out loud on a regular basis in like the weirdest ways. So I'm going to give you an example. So first of all, I just want to say I love my parents and they're wonderful people and they are who they are, right? And so I'm not trying to bash them. I love them. But we were watching the Weather Channel the other day, and my parents were commenting on the weather woman's clothing, and like, I thought she was spectacular. Like, it suited her well, and they were like, "Oh, she's so pretty. Why does she dress like that?" Or that top is too tight, or whatever, whatever. And it's not blatantly judgmental or blatantly insulting. It's kind of underhanded. She's such a pretty girl. Why did she wear a dress like that? Like, does that make her not pretty? And I'm kind of understanding how much of the negative self talk I have in my mind is not mine. It's my mother and father's. And it's not because they really did it to me, though they definitely did some years of my life, but witnessing them doing it to other people, you automatically take on that dialogue. I also have like ongoing huge issues with food, very, very complex. I have hired so many people to help me with this issue over the last 10 years, and literally it just keeps going. Definitely related to my parents and watching them and the way they behave with food, the way they talk about it, totally blows my mind. And it's helping reflect back to me like, oh, damn, that's actually not mine. I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to believe that anymore. And the last thing is cleanliness. So I have my cat and my dog here, and it's been really funny watching my mom and my dad try to clean up after a golden retriever because it's constant. They have so much hair. But there's just like this anxiety and OCD about cleanliness that I also have, which isn't a terrible thing. but I never understood it. And I'm always very critical of myself. Like my house was very kind of minimalist. Sometimes I had more dog hair than I wanted to. But I beat myself up about it a lot. And I can see that that's not mine either. Absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild to go through this experience. And so, as I'm sitting here and I'm observing this, like I'm in a state of destruction, death, and rebuilding within myself. I am having all of these tendencies and all of these beliefs that I've been carrying around, both obviously and not obviously, my entire life that are being reassessed. And that is total underworld work, right? We are going through death, and death is part of the underworld, and all of these parts of me that are connected to my family and my childhood are dying off. So this is kind of a real time, real life example of how we go through underworld periods. Now that I'm here, I can see that my fear of getting too comfortable in this place was not valid. Previously, when I was in a space of like density or we'll call it suffering too, stuckness, it became a very comfortable place for me. And I could stay in shadow work forever because I'm more comfortable there than working in the light, than working in the higher vibrations. And I had a lot of nervousness around like getting too comfortable staying at my parents' house, not wanting to leave, um, getting stuck in like just a complacency cycle. And now that I'm here, I can see that that was not an option, that there's always going to be like momentum keeping me moving forward if I choose the path of change. If I don't choose, the path of least resistance or to go back down the suffering. And some of the key things that I've had to bring in for myself through this last week is patience and grace and remembering that these things take time, like real deep work, the work we talk about doing the work, shadow work, underworld work, healing work, childhood healing or childhood trauma. This stuff takes time. Like you can't walk into a situation in your life where you're having all these belief and structures upended and expect it to pass within a week. I'm beating myself up on a daily basis for not doing enough work, for not promoting my Italy retreat, for not seeing any clients until February. And that doesn't really give any space for me to go through this necessary healing process. It's a foundational healing process. And that stuff takes time. So I'm over here trying to be patient with myself. When I go through these deep underworld periods, it's super, super important for me to remind myself that I'm going to be okay. Remind myself that this isn't going to last forever. I do that with post-it notes. I do it with dry erase markers on the bathroom mirror. I do it with like calendar reminders, daily journaling. Like, do not forget. You just have to move through this and get to the other side. This is not a permanent state. Because when you're in this space, it is heavy. It is challenging. And if you're not ready for it, it will take you down. And it will take you down and down and down and down until you're ready to pop back out. So this is my this is my real-time update from Homosassa, Florida, at my parents' house. Um, Thank you for listening to my experience today. And do reach out if you have any questions or you need any support in your own journey through the underworld. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.